Good morning. I'm Elizabeth VanderPutten, a member of the Board of Trustees. Welcome to our service. I hope that you have enjoyed this weekend. The touch of fall seems like a new beginning to me, and it may be because I was a teacher for so long, and September is always a mark of a beginning time. In any event, I hope that you will be able to enjoy the weather, get outside later on this afternoon. But after our service, I hope you will join us for our coffee hour, where you will get a chance to meet in small groups and discuss some of the issues raised at our service. So welcome, and I do hope that you enjoy the service. Thank you.
Our call to worship this morning comes from the Reverend Teresa Soto. Bring your broken hallelujah here. Bring the large one that is beyond repair. Bring the small one that's too soft to share. Bring your broken hallelujah here. I know that people have told you before you can give, you have to get yourself together. They overstated the value of perfection by a lot. Or they forgot. You are the gift. We all bring some broken things, songs and dreams and long-lost hopes. But here, together, we reach within. As a community, we begin again. And from the pieces, we will build something new. There is work that only you can do. We wait for you.
We are the Poppy Verchinsky family, and we loved seeing the Kerr family last week and hearing the chalice lighting words that they wrote. We want to invite other families with children in the congregation to send us recordings of your chalice lightings that we might use in worship as we are worshiping virtually together. Whether you use fancy words or simple ones, whether you have a little tiny chalice at home or a great big chalice at home, We want to hear from you. And today, we wanted to share words that we wrote for our chalice lighting this morning.
We light this chalice to honor our community and how lucky we are to be in this together.
Building bridges between all divisions, I reach out to you, will you reach out to me? With all our voices and all our visions, friends, we could make such sweet harmony. Building bridges between all divisions, I reach out to you, will you reach out to me? With all our voices and all our visions, friends, we could make such sweet harmony. Building bridges between our divisions, I reach out to you, will you reach out to me? With all our voices between our divisions, I reach out to you, will you reach out to me? I reach out to riches between our visions, friends, we could make such sweet harmony. With all our voices and all our visions, friends, we could make such sweet harmony. With all our riches between our visions, friends, we could make such sweet harmony. I will take riches between our visions. 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 With friends we shall make such sweet harmonies. Friends we could make such sweet harmonies.
This story has been around for a long time. It comes to us from the Jewish tradition, although the version we are telling today is adapted from a book called One City, Two Brothers, written by Chris Smith with beautiful illustrations by Aurelia Fronti.
Hey, two brothers, huh? I feel like we have two brothers somewhere, maybe right here. Huh, what a coincidence.
Amazing! So, Beckett and Max, let's get telling. This is actually kind of a story within a story. It starts with two brothers who once came before King Solomon. King Solomon had a reputation for being very wise and for using stories to help solve problems, which is actually a great idea for all of us. Anyway, these two brothers had argued bitterly about who should inherit the family land. Solomon listened to them and then told them to be silent and listen to this story of two other brothers from long ago.
There were two other brothers who lived on either side of a hill. These brothers had houses that were linked by two paths, one over the hill and one around it. Together, they farmed the rich, fertile land watered by a stream. They shared the work, planting the wheat in the autumn, harvesting it in the spring, and they shared the crop. Most years, they managed to last through the winter comfortably on what the land gave. One brother married, and soon children were born.
Awesome! I'm a family man. I tell dad jokes.
The other, for whatever reason, stayed single.
Awesome! I'm flying solo.
Everyone was happy with their life choices.
Now, one year, the land gave them a particularly bountiful crop. They harvested 40 sacks of grain. This they split between them, each taking 20 to their own storeroom. But the older brother thought to himself,
It's not right that I should have the same number of sacks as my brother. He has no family, no children to look after him when he gets old. He needs this grain more than me.
And late that night, loading 3 sacks of grain onto his donkey, he took the high path to his brother's house and sneaked 3 sacks of grain into his brother's store.
What he didn't know is that his brother had been thinking too.
It's not right that I should have the same amount of grain as my brother. He has a family and more mouths to feed. I'll take some secretly over to him.
And under cover of darkness, he took the low path and deposited 3 sacks of grain in his brother's grain store.
You can imagine how puzzled both of them were the next morning when they looked in their own grain stores and found there were still 20 sacks. Were they losing their wits? Had it just been a dream?
I need to start doing brain teasers to stay sharp. I've got to stop eating pickles before bedtime.
Both brothers did the same the following night, without either of them seeing the other. And the next day, they were even more puzzled. There were still 20 sacks in the storeroom. On the 3rd night, both brothers did the same thing, but this time, they both took the high path, and under the starry sky, they met each other. Without a word, both of them understood the reason for his brother's journey. Their hearts filled with happiness as they realized the love they each had been shown.
With these words, Solomon, remember that guy, finished his tale. The 2 men before him stood in silence for a long while. Everyone waited to see what would happen. Then the older man looked up and said,
What was once our father's is now ours. Not yours, not mine, but ours. Not yours, not mine, but ours.
The brothers embraced and left Solomon's court side by side. From then on, their families lived happily together, and the story their children loved to hear the most was the one about the 2 brothers told by wise King Solomon.
So we actually had 3 sets of brothers today. The brothers with the grain, the brothers who heard that story from King Solomon, and the brothers who were helping us tell the story. Beckett and Max, take a bow.
Thank you.
And Luna.
Over the past few years, and especially the past few months, we have learned that we are the church. All of us, together, create a beloved community. We may be away from our building for a while, but we find sanctuary in each other. And our work continues through covenant groups, religious education, the music program, the social justice ministries, our pastoral care team, and many more endeavors. The mission of this congregation continues through these difficult times when we realize how very important it is to be part of a community. We are temporarily suspending our Share the Plate program to focus on all of the ministries of this church community. By giving to UUCA, you contribute to the spiritual center that keeps us all connected. You support all of us and our collaborative efforts to make a difference. You can mail a check payable to UUCA with the word offering or pledge in the memo line. You can give online at the church website, uucava.org. Just click on the donate button on the top of the page. Or you can donate by text, Or you can donate by using the mobile app Give Plus. Just enter the zip code 22204 and choose our church, UUCA, and follow the prompt to give now. Our offertory prayer reminds us, let us be grateful when we are able to give, for many do not have that privilege. Let us be grateful for those who share their gifts with us, for we are enriched by their giving. And let us be grateful, even for our needs, so that we may learn from the generosity of others.
Just as we share our gifts and commitment in this community, so do we share our full hearts, our full selves. On Friday evening, as our Jewish beloveds began the observation of Rosh Hashanah, we received news that Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg had died at 87. For many of us, Supreme Court Justice Ginsburg's history of working for gender equality, for racial justice, and for equality for the queer community is a legacy that we hold dear. And perhaps, like me, you were filled with grief and with gratitude for her life. Perhaps, like me, you thought of others you have lost, whether heroes you admired from afar or those held very close in your circle. I invite you now into a time of prayer and meditation. I invite you to bring whatever is on your heart today. Spirit of life and love, God of many names, let us feel you around us. Let us feel the spirit of life, even as we grieve and mourn death. Let us feel the spirit of life as we remember. Let us feel the spirit of life as we honor those we have lost with our own lives. Spirit of life and love, be with us in all we carry, our personal joys and sorrows, our community connections, our care for our nation and the world. Be with us as we hold our beloveds who are caught in fire and smoke on the West Coast, Be with us as we hold all who struggle to have their voices heard, their lives matter. Join us as we hold those in our hearts we know most deeply. Spirit of life and love, be with us in all that we carry. May it be so. During the music that follows, I invite you to share in the chat any names that you hold in your heart today, any cares that rest deeply, any joys you are celebrating. You are welcome, as always, to share those with uucapastoralcare@gmail.com, with anyone on the ministry team or with the pastoral care associates, with each other. Let us in this time, in this moment, remember what it is to be a community together. As some of you know, for the last 12 years, I have been serving an ethical society before accepting the call to come and serve this congregation. Because of that, I have had many conversations with ethical culturists who are a little suspicious of Unitarian Universalism. For that matter, I've had conversations over the years with Unitarian Universalists who are suspicious of Unitarian Universalism. And it has been helpful in those moments to remind them of Unitarian Universalism's history as a covenantal faith, not a creedal one. That's unusual for faiths, particularly those that emerge out of Christian tradition, that rather than a creed, a set of beliefs that we ascribe to as members, instead we are bound together by our covenant, by the promises we make to each other, by our choice to move together through life. That covenantal nature is part of what made us heretics in our early history, and it's part of what has allowed Unitarian Universalism now to be a faith open to Muslim Unitarian Universalists and Jewish Unitarian Universalists, to Hindus and atheists and agnostics. Because it isn't about the set of beliefs that you bring with you or that you discover within and among us. It's about being together, about how we are together as a community. Now, often we think about covenants as really a set of written promises, explicit ways that we choose to be together in community. And UUCA has one of those covenants, a congregational covenant. I had the chance this last week to have some conversation with the person who was in charge of the task force that created this covenant, probably about 15 years ago. She explained to me that the covenant came out of a time of congregational conflict, when UUCA's leadership wanted to come up with a way to do things differently next time, perhaps to do it better. And so they created this congregational covenant, a series of ways to be together, ways we wanted to speak to each other with respect and kindness and love. As I hear it told, that covenant is often recited aloud at the beginning of annual meetings here at UUCA. A reminder, perhaps as the congregation is moving into a tense or difficult conversation about our core values as a community, how we want to be together. The thing is, we don't really want covenants to feel central and important only when we think there might be a problem coming up, or even worse, when we are in the midst of a problem. We want covenants to feel alive at all times in our community. And so I started thinking about the other ways that covenant might show up in the UUCA congregation. Many of you have talked to me about your covenant groups, about the small groups that meet for at least a year together, talking about big questions and getting to know each other deeply. You've told me that those covenant groups are among the ways you feel most connected at UUCA. Now, some covenant groups do have an explicit covenant that they've created and written down together. But for many covenant groups, their covenant is what I might call implicit. Their covenant is alive in the way they show up each month, the way they hold confidentiality for the group, the way they listen to each other when someone is sharing their story. Their covenant isn't written down, it's lived in their being together. The Unitarian Universalist theologian Rebecca Parker has something to say about this idea of explicit covenant and implicit covenant. A number of years ago, she wrote about covenant historically. She said, as Unitarian Universalists, we most often speak of covenant as a verbal statement of promise between individuals who exercise their power to choose and thus to bring community into being. There are historical reasons why we think this way. It is an expression of the dominance of an individualistic understanding of human existence. Individual first, then community. Parker goes on, though, to explore whether that understanding of covenant is really the deepest one. She posits that covenant exists, whether it is written down or not, all the time and with practically everyone. We are born, she says, into relationship before we shape relationships by our conscious intention. We inherit covenant before we create covenant. Covenant making, then, must begin with the question, what have we been given? What is the covenant we are already in? What is the covenant we are already in? I heard a story from Laura Solomon, our ministerial intern for the year at UUCA. Laura and I have been working together over the past year, and she often passes these stories along to me, and I'm grateful to share it with you. It was attributed, I think, to Margaret Mead, though the provenance is much more complicated. Ain't that the truth with almost anything? Anyway, the way it goes is this, that we know the origin of community, of civilization, by dating the first body found with a broken and healed femur. The thing is, if just the individual matters, then if an individual breaks their leg, they are left. And perhaps at some point in human history, that was indeed how we functioned. Someone who wasn't able to keep up with the group or to find their own food was left to die. Their body would be found with a broken femur, unhealed. And so to find a body buried with a broken and healed femur, it tells us that this person's community understood them as more than an individual, understood them as part of a community, part of a covenant together, an agreement to care for each other. They brought this person food when they couldn't get it themselves. They waited until they could walk again. This broken and healed femur was the beginning of community. Now, the thing is that beginning of community, that start of what it means to be human together in covenant, in implicit and inherited covenant, well, some of us have gotten away from that. America, I would say, might be an example, or certainly white America, dominant American culture. Rebecca Parker refers to this as the individualistic understanding of human existence. The idea that we are individuals first and foremost who might choose to be in community or might not. Now, without trying to take away anybody's power of choice, I wonder if there's a different way that we might understand our being together. Juana Bordas writes in her book, Salsa, Soul, and Spirit, Leadership for a Multicultural Age, about the idea of individualist versus collectivist cultural orientations, what she calls I culture versus we culture. Bordas describes growing up with a strong sense of family and community ethic as a Latina Catholic. She writes, "We was embedded deep in my soul. I didn't understand then, but it sustained me when I left my family to go to college and live in the strange land of the I's. In we cultures, the I exists only in relationship to others, not as a separate entity. Being covenanted together, being community together, doesn't erase the individual. It's there, the I, as Bordas calls it, in relationship with others. Being covenanted emphasizes the importance of that community, that each one of us is fundamentally relational." Tema Okun is the author of a series of attributes she associates with white supremacy culture. Not the culture of white supremacists, but the culture of dominant whiteness that we might find in America, the culture that we swim in America, certainly if we are white, the culture that appears in America around us. Within that list of white supremacy culture, Tema Okun identifies individualism as one of those core cultural concepts. She describes it this way: within this culture of individualism, we might have little experience or comfort working as part of a team. People in an organization believe they are responsible for solving problems alone. Accountability, if any, goes up and down. And ultimately, Tema Okun tells us, this culture creates a lack of accountability, as the organization values those who can get things done on their own without needing supervision or guidance. Perhaps that sounds familiar if you are swimming like me in the dominant culture in America, bootstraps and all. Just as Unitarian Universalism was countercultural historically, creating covenantal and not creedal communities, we can be countercultural now, fighting against that dominant culture of individualism that we find in majority white America. We can choose to listen to the collectivist cultures that some of us bring with us, to the we cultures around us. We might listen even to nature. Adrienne Maree Brown is the author of Emergent Strategy, a book I recommend to everyone for everything. In the book, Adrienne Maree Brown looks for models of leadership in the natural world. She notes that although there is competition in the natural world, humans, she writes, are unique because we compete when it isn't necessary. We could reason our way to more sustainable processes, but we use our intelligence to outsmart each other. We compete for fun, for ego. Adrienne Maree Brown describes herself as a recovering, charismatic leader. In the book, Brown points to the murmuration of sparrows, to ants and bees and other social insects, successful because they are social, because they are, one might imagine, covenanted with each other, relational. So what kind of covenants do we have? How are we countercultural in this congregation? And how might we be more so? There are, in fact, many written covenants at UUCA, not just the congregational one. The board has a covenant. Laura, as ministerial intern, has what's called a learning service agreement with me as her teaching pastor, which is really a series of hopes and promises for how she might learn and how she might teach all of us too. We are covenanted as a congregation to teach her. The staff covenants together in our work with each other as a whole. And on October 18th, I will be installed as your senior minister, a covenanting together, a promise of who we want to be with each other. We will speak words at that installation. We will share real promises to each other. But just like the vows at a wedding, the promises will only come true in our living of them together, and in our messing up and returning again, our remembering that covenant is often broken, and that part of being in covenant together is recommitting, renewing the covenant over and over again. In a progressive religious tradition, we covenant with each other, but also with an understanding of the sacred between and among and beyond us. Covenanting, as you might be aware, is all through the Hebrew Bible and the New Testament, right along with broken covenants, just as frequently. Those storytellers and history holders knew what we know now. To err is human. To forgive, to come together again, as Alexander Pope told us, is divine. And so our covenanting is that over and over again, a remembering of our promises, a recommitment to them. One of the things I've done in the last few weeks is to ask all of you about your hopes for UUCA. One of the yearnings that I have heard is for a kind of deeper relationality, a knowing each other on core levels, and to an understanding of the congregation as belonging to all of us. There are so many individual projects and passions and ideas that come into being and are nurtured within the UUCA community. And even as I have heard people celebrate those, I hear too your hope that we can come to understand those as not our individual projects, but as part of the we that we share. Not yours, not mine, but ours. That when your project succeeds, even if mine is struggling, I celebrate you and I expect your help and celebration as well. That the congregation belongs to all of us and that we belong to each other. Not yours, not mine, but ours. And here's the real trick: to keep the ours expanding. To know that the covenants and promises made between each of us will change over time as more and more of us come in. That perhaps the language will stay the same, but the tune will change, or vice versa. To keep the we expanding year after year, even as we renew the promises we make to each other. It brings me back to Rebecca Parker's words, that we are always in covenant together, that covenant is inherited between and among us, and that it must always expand to include one more. A community based on that kind of love. The kind that welcomes in, that promises and renews those promises. A congregation built on the understanding that we are fundamentally relational. That our I exists only because of we. That we belong to each other. That is a congregation that will change the world. And that congregation is not yours and not mine, but it is ours.
I'm gonna lift my sister up, she is not happy. I'm gonna lift my sister up, she is not happy. I'm gonna lift my sister up, she is not happy. If I don't lift her up, if I don't lift her up, if I don't lift her up, I will fall down.
I'm gonna lift my brother up, he is not heavy.
I'm gonna lift my brother up, he is not heavy.
I'm gonna lift my brother up, he is not heavy.
If I don't lift him up, if I don't lift him up, if I don't lift him up, I will fall down. I'm gonna lift my people up, they are not heavy. I'm gonna lift my people up, they are not heavy. I'm
This week, may you lift a sibling up, and may you be lifted up yourself. May we remember that in this community, all of us is welcome, our broken hallelujah too, and that together we create a community that is not yours, not mine, but ours. May it be so. Amen.